Hi, I'm Tara from the Marathon Mates. Welcome to episode number 137. On tonight's episode, we're talking about races which are best suited for the back of the pack runners like us. We'll celebrate races which put the extra effort in to make sure that those at the back of the pack have the best possible race day experience. In fact, we are so passionate about supporting back of the pack runners that Tony has created an index that measures the friendliness of races for back of the packers. So tonight, we're going to talk about that index and share with you some of the races that have already been ranked. As you know, we love running and we love sharing our adventures of running around the world. We're the only podcast with 5 7-star world major marathon runners, and this is the Flying Runner podcast. Are you ready to run? Let's go.
Teach the flying runner, run far, run free. Host the 7 stars, inclusive as can be. It's the flying runner for you and me.
Excellent. Welcome back. Before we have a laugh and talk about back of the pack friendliness, let me introduce you to my co-hosts tonight, Tony, Lucia, and my husband, Tim. And, of course, we now have Peter joining us, who is our 5th 7-star world marathon major medalist. Yay! Sorry, I got that without even working it out. So I can't believe that you've returned, Peter. Thank you very much. You must have really enjoyed the experience last week.
I did, Tara. Thank you. We were talking about running in Japan, which are 2 of my favourite topics of all time. And then tonight you've managed to pick another topic, back of the packers, which is very close to my heart. So it's lovely to be back.
Excellent, excellent. So what have you all been up to for this week? Tony, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm the easy one because I did a walk on Saturday. That was it. So just to update the listeners, I did go and see my physio last Tuesday, and I've got another session with him tomorrow. But he wants to refer me to a surgeon, so he's worried about the horizontal tear, both in. So I've got a horizontal tear in the meniscus body and the posterior horn, and apparently the posterior horn is where it joins the bone or something. So that's the one he's worried about. So who knows? But I was saying to Luch off air that really annoys me because 90% of the time it actually feels good, but if I move it the wrong way, I get severe pain. So still just if I can get a couple of walks in this week, I'll be happy. But I have lost 4 kilos in the last 3 weeks, so I'm pretty pumped about that too. So, but that's it.
Well done. So obviously running is making you gain weight, and not running is making you lose weight. Don't know how that works, but you have to share that.
It's interesting you say that, because one of the things that Sharon and I have both found with running is that when you're doing long distances all the time, your mindset is that pretty much you can almost eat anything, right? So I don't think it's really effective from a mindset for people who do like food and beer like I do. So going for a 20K run on the weekend and then nullifying all that work with, chips and pies and good old football food, it really sometimes running can actually hurt you from a nutrition point of view. So that's one of the things I'm learning, and I've just got some discipline back around my diet. So hopefully it can continue.
Well done, Tony. You should be very proud of yourself. And Lucia, what have you been up to this week?
So a couple more runs this week, which was good. I was meant to do 14Ks yesterday, but the humidity in Sydney was just absolutely atrocious. So I pulled the pin at 6. I'm like, no, not doing it. Ain't happening. So I wasn't disappointed at all. But the thing I had to do was I had to get a minimum of 15,000 steps in, because Yoichi was doing this promotion that if you got, I think it was 5,000 steps, it was 15% off. 15,000 steps, it was 50% off. 25,000 steps, you got one up $10 for free. So I had to do that. But the clinger was, and I hope that any of our listeners don't work for Yochi. I had my sister's phone with me as well. And for our listeners that have been listening for a while, my sister is the most inactive person there is. So I had my phone with me and my sister's phone just so she could get the steps in as well. And then we had our Yochi. But something interesting I did today was I actually had a call with a dietitian, because as part, one of the benefits we've gotten for being an ambassador is some extra like physio and dietitian. So I laid it out straight to her. I said to her, I'm known for stopping mid-training run and having a milkshake. She goes, don't tell me you keep going. I said, no, I stop. She laughed. So I was upfront and honest with all my little quirkiness I do with my food, and she's given me some good tips. So hopefully, like, I know what I need to do. It's just sticking to it now type thing. But I think once I get back into a work routine, hopefully that will make things better for me as well. So it's not that I was completely off track. It's just being a bit more stricter for a better word. So hopefully I can shift some weight before Sydney, or Goldie would be good too, but we'll see how we go. So that was me.
Well done. And Peter, how about you?
Yeah, well, I'm 6 weeks out from Hobart when this goes to air, so we're getting down to the serious end. So Sunday I had a 26K long run, and I am like a hungry hippo at the moment. I totally understand what Tony's saying. Like, I'm at that stage of marathon training where you're just hungry all the time. And sometimes it's because I haven't drunk enough water, or I was actually asking ChatGPT what to do about it yesterday, and it suggested having a bit more protein with my breakfast and lunch. And also I work at home, which is a big hazard. I can go out to the kitchen and get whatever I want. So it said, don't eat at your desk. Make sure you have set meal times. And, when you're feeling that snacky sort of urge around 2 or 3 o'clock, take your laptop, move to another spot with a cup of tea and water, and have a planned good protein snack like a smoothie. Or it said I could have Greek yogurt and dark chocolate, or an apple with peanut butter. And I thought, thanks, ChatGPT, you're right. I just need to do some simple habit changes and stop grazing like a dairy cow,
So it sounds like all about, what do we call them, professionals are going to be out of a job, because Tony's using him for a coach. You're using yours for a dietitian. It sounds like all of these professionals, apart from massage, I don't think ChatGPTs can quite get the massage thing happening yet. So our podiatrists, yes.
Did you see the Chinese robots last week? I think massage is coming.
Oh, yes, it's a good point, Tony. Yes. And Tim, what about us for this week?
Well, you've done a lot more than me, Tara. I've had general life stuff get in the way of my routine this week. So where I was building up consistency and trying to get through about 50 Ks a week, which I was doing most weeks over the first 4 or 5 weeks of the year, the last week or so has just been tied up with work and life stuff that I just haven't got out and done any real running at all. And the only run I've done all week is park run on Saturday, where we went to Mitchelton Park Run. I ran the first 2.5 Ks out with you, and then decided that I'd challenge myself to see if I could put 100 people between me and Tara when we finished. And I came in at 176th and Tara came in at 278th. And it wasn't that you were running a slow time. You still ran it in 32 minutes even. I just put 102 people between us. So that was all right. I achieved my goal. So yeah, try and fit some more stuff in this week. It's a busy week this week for me as well, but I'll try and fit a couple of extra runs in there if I can. So yeah, just the challenge we all have. Sometimes life gets in the way.
And we missed our long run on Sunday, so it's very unusual for us to miss a long run Sunday. However, we were in Toowoomba, which is a country city, not a town. It's a country city in Queensland, at a music festival. So yeah, that was a lot of fun, which was great. So we missed our long run. So yeah, I've just done probably maybe 35, 40 Ks this week of just general bits and pieces of running. So, I guess now, Tony, have you got any feedback from our listeners at all?
I actually do, and I just want to share a couple of things first. The other day, I mentioned, I shared with the group that we had a comment on one of our YouTube videos, right, from a person in Atlanta that was now flying to the Tokyo Marathon, and thanked us for putting that content out. So, and Tim made a comment to me. He said, it's really interesting that we've got people listening to our podcast that we fundamentally don't know. So I thought I would just do a little bit of an update on where we actually sit with that in terms of who our audience is and what they're doing. So first up, I'm going to start with YouTube, because YouTube is the one that, you know, was a bit of a slow burn, and I've done some shorts, but I haven't done short videos for probably the last 3 weeks because, you know, like Tim, life gets in the way. But we now have over 21,500 views on our YouTube channel, right? So, you know, I think that's spectacular just for who we are and how we've started, and we do zero marketing and all of this stuff, right? So I think that's a really good, nice figure. Currently sitting at 64 subscribers, so who knows how much more we can actually get. But, you know, I don't know about you, but 21,500 views on our YouTube channel is not something to sneeze at, right? Then when you look at our actual audience, right? Our audience on YouTube is predominantly male. So our YouTube, our audience on our podcast platforms are predominantly female. 64.7% of our people are female. And the demographic, we don't appeal to young people. Let me just put it that out there. So our 66% of our audience is in that age bracket 45 to 59. So, you know, representing, I guess, who we are in so many ways. So once again, you look at our audience around the world, 60% of podcast listeners or viewers, 59% are Australian, 27% in the US, 5% in the UK, but that's starting to grow. We're starting to rank again in the UK. I'm going to put that down to our good friend Mark, who's sharing us on a weekly basis at the moment. Our Kiwi friends are at 4%, and then we've got, you know, under 1%, Romania, Spain, Japan, and Canada. So most of our listeners listen to us on Apple Podcasts, which is interesting, 41.9% there. On Spotify, about 38%. And then the next biggest one is people who actually listen through a web browser. So which is just over the 10%. So I think there's some pretty cool stuff there, just quietly. So, and just the other thing I do want to mention before we sort of move away, I just want to give a kudos to Tim, because I don't know about you, but my social media feed has been dominated by influencers telling us everything they need to know about Tokyo. And can I tell you, our episode with 4 7-star finishes, all providing 10 tips, absolutely lapped some of the influencers, right? So I saw a number of younger influencers, obviously appealing to the younger audience, using old information, using dated things around the cutoffs, all to, you know, doing the right thing and sharing, but not using the right information. And the one that I was really disappointed with is, and I'm not going to mention the podcast because I think people will actually know who I'm talking about. So, but there's a podcast that I listen to religiously. It's one of the much better podcasts. It's informal. It can go quite off the rails many times. and it's UK based. And, the reason why I started listening to this podcast in the first place was because of the in-depth episode they did around the London Marathon when I was doing the London Marathon. But they put out a podcast episode called Tokyo Marathon Tips and Course Strategy. And they didn't know the start time. The start time, depending on when you listen to the podcast, it could have been 9 o'clock, it might have been 9:30, or it could even have been 10 o'clock, right? And then ultimately things like, I'm not quite sure, words like that all the way through it. And then ultimately they ended up talking about 7 marathons in 7 continents, and also, Lucia would have liked this, ranking marathon merchandise, right? So I just thought to myself, if someone had tuned into that to get their Tokyo tips and course strategy, they would have been severely disappointed. So I just wanted to give kudos to Tim, because he puts a lot of work into our run sheet each and every week. It annoys me most of the time because I get all the tough names to read. But truly the information that we provide on our podcast is either coming from personal experience, and even when it comes from personal experience, we're updating by reading the athlete's guide for a lot of these marathons, so we're up to date. So I just wanted to shout that out, because I think, especially last week, our episode was an absolutely rip tickler, and it was awesome. It was informal, but there was so much gold that we shared. So thanks again, Tim. Sorry.
Thanks, Tony. Is that just because you dissed me last week and said, who's Tim? Can't remember who he is?
Yeah.
Because one episode.
Yeah. As most of our listeners know, Tim and I take a little bit of the mickey out of each other. But we're old enough and ugly enough to take it, and we give it back. So, and while he wasn't here, I certainly took the opportunity to have a little bit of laugh at his expense, knowing full well that he'd be listening back to the podcast to see what we did wrong and what we didn't do in the episode. It's all good.
No, it's all good. Thanks for that, Tony. It isn't. That's the benefit, I guess, of having 4, now 5 7-star runners, that we actually have been there, done that, and have the experience. That particular podcast you're talking about, not one person on there has all 7 stars, and yet they're talking about these events, and they don't know much about them. They're very good at other things, and they're very good at other things that they talk about, particularly UK-based things. But I found the same thing when it comes to majors. They're not that strong on it. So, but anyway, back to you, Tara.
Cool. All right. So we don't normally diss other podcasts and stuff, so apologies for that. Now, anyway, before we get to the news, last week I introduced the world to Tara's trivia. So for our listeners who missed last week's episode, I now have a new segment where I will jump in and out of the episode with a series of questions to help us solve a trivia question about running. The topic can be anything about running, so including things like people. Last week's trivia was about Robert de Castella, races, locations, and products. So my first clue for tonight's trivia is about this. This marathon was first held on the 18th of February 2007. So none of our hosts are going to mention that if they know what it is until the end. So thanks, guys.
I wasn't here last week. Do I get a chance to guess it?
You do not get a chance to guess it because you're looking at my notes. So no. Thanks, guys. Now it's that time of the week where we're going to talk about the news. Excellent. And Tim, what's been happening around the world this week for the news?
Alrighty, thanks, Tara. Some big news relating to the Sydney Marathon, and I guess again, this is us being up to date with the latest changes and the latest news. And the news this week is that the Sydney Marathon Running Show, which is a fancy name for the expo, and we love how they changed the names from expos, don't we, Lucia, to something fancy. So the TCS Sydney Marathon Running Show presented by ASICS is set to evolve in 2026 with a new home. For those who went last year or in previous years, it's mainly been held in and around the CBD area. Last year it was held in Darling Harbour at the ICC, and in previous years it's been held down, I can't remember the name of it, but down towards
Alexandria.
Yeah. Yep. This year it's going to take place at the Sydney Showground at Sydney Olympic Park, which was home to the 2000 Olympic venues for athletics and a number of other events in that area. So it will take place across 3 days from August 27th through to Saturday the 29th, and will form a key part of race week as runners arrive in Sydney to collect their race bibs and immerse themselves in the build up to the event. They are saying that they, being the TCS Sydney Marathon organisers, have said that the event continues to grow in its second year as an Abbott World Major Marathon, and this move will allow us to create an even bigger, more immersive and more dynamic running show experience. With increased capacity, wider walkways and more flexible layout, Sydney Showground provides the perfect stage for Australia's largest running expo to evolve. More space means more exhibitors, more activations, more opportunities to explore the latest in running technology, health and fitness trends, and more chances to connect with fellow participants, event partners, and charities. So the problem I see, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go, but the problem I see is Sydney Olympic Park is not exactly central to North Sydney, which is where the start of the marathon is, or to Sydney CBD, which is where the finish line is outside the Opera House. So they have acknowledged this, and they are putting on extra public transport in all forms, particularly buses, ferries, and light rail. And you'll get an additional train service that runs every 30 minutes from the CBD in Sydney through to Olympic Park. Now, Lucia, you're the local down there. My experience going to Sydney Olympic Park from the CBD is it's anywhere from a 30 to 45 minute commute thereabouts on a train. Would that be right?
Yeah. So it will all depend if you get a direct train from Central out to Olympic Park. That generally it will do one stop at Stratfield along the way, and that can take up to about 30 minutes. But if you're going to get a train that isn't a direct one, you will do Central to Lidcombe, then change trains for like 2 stops to Lidcombe out to Olympic Park. So it can vary anywhere in between the 30 and to the 45 minute mark. I can see why they've moved it. And for any of our listeners that are from interstate, if you've ever been to the Sydney Royal Easter Show, that's the location of it. So basically, the Woolworths Dome is one part. My gut feeling is that a number of the halls will be used for different things. So last year, how they had the bib pickup and the T-shirt pickup, it was in a small area. So my gut is that they're going to use one of the halls to maybe half of that will be for the bib pickup, the T-shirt pickup, and probably bag drop as well. And then ASICS will probably have a bigger area. And I think they took a lot away from last year in terms of how it was set out, with it being a bit crowded and actually having a bigger stage as well. Because when I was on stage, yes, unfortunately, people did have to see my face again. It was in kind of a weird spot, and it wasn't in its own area. So you kind of literally had to not go out of your way. But I think what they'll do is they'll have like a better area for the stage and different talks, and set it up how they do some of the running shows in the UK, maybe have different stages for different talks. So while it's not central as the ICC was, because a lot of the shakeout runs either started or finished there, it's going to be hard for a shakeout run to start or finish out at Olympic Park. And also a lot of runners would come straight from the airport and go to the expo when I was at ICC, but that's not going to be achievable. Well, unless they bring their suitcases out to Olympic Park. Yeah, so it's a lot more space.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. I know, Peter, you're talking about on our little chat group that we have, that last year you liked to go to the expo 3 or 4 times, a couple of times to volunteer and a couple of times just to have a look around. I know, Tony, you're the same. Yeah. You like to go to the expo a couple of times. This may prevent some of that, maybe, Peter. I'm not sure.
Yeah, definitely. I was pretty lucky where we usually stay is walking distance to the ICC, and you do have that luxury that you can go back more than once. And also that venue is relatively new for Sydney. It was a big deal to have that purpose-built convention centre, so it's a bit of a shame not to use it. And, the organisers haven't tried things like timed entry to try and calm some of that chaos. They were very responsive last year, but, while this move has been decided and they are promising a lot there in that description, I'm like most people will probably go just the once. I think a lot more Sydney-siders will be inclined to drive there now, which is not necessarily a good thing. But, with more vendors, maybe we'll get some roofing quotes, you guys. There'll be some, get some hairstyling done.
And join the army as well.
Yeah.
Tony, have you got any thoughts on it?
Yeah, look, obviously Lucia being an ambassador to Sydney Marathon, a community ambassador, means that she probably can't express truly what she feels. And I'm not certainly going to speak for her at all. But I mean, I've tried to logically think about this, right? So, because I think, as we saw in the last 2 years, that vibe around the ICC was amazing, for about 3 or 4 days straight, right? Once the expo opens, there's runners there, they're eating, they're drinking, they're running, as Luch was saying, shakeout runs. The only apart from the bigger, the bigger venue and potentially some cost benefit as well, I would imagine the only other benefit is by spreading that vibe that you got in Sydney Central and starting to bring that vibe out to let's call it the suburbs, right? I know Homebush was purpose-built for the 2000 Olympics, but that's the only sort of benefit that I'm thinking that they could possibly trying to get, that concept, that feeling, that vibe around Homebush, as opposed to getting that around the ICC. I think the vibe will still be around the ICC because most people are still going to stay central to the city or close to the start line. So I think they've just added a challenge for people to get to the expo. And as you were saying, it's probably only going to be a once. It's like, I liken it to the expo at London because that's right out in the middle of nowhere from what I remember. We're on a bus trip that had to take us out there. And then the train trip home wasn't overly simple. But, maybe I've not quite sure where that sits location wise, but I don't understand it. There was, was there more space available at the ICC that they could have got? I don't know. But I think that vibe around the ICC is something that if they can replicate that at Homebush, I'll be surprised.
Yeah, I think it's going to be challenging. Hopefully it gives them more space for activations and maybe to do something unique and different. Yeah, Tara?
Yeah, I think from people from overseas, it's a good way for them to actually see other parts of Sydney as well. And as Tony was saying, we didn't really complain about having to go to a different place. Tokyo, again, was a fair way out of the city for their expo. As a outside person, I guess, or as a international person, you don't really worry about it when you're overseas somewhere. So I'm assuming that the overseas people aren't going to stress about it too much either. It's only us because we know how close it was previously that it's probably phasing us or concerning us more than what it should be.
Just what you mentioned there, Tara, is very interesting because you're right. In Tokyo and London, there is quite a hype. But you don't get that vibe around, like I liken it to Boston, right? So when you do Boston, you've got the expo right in the city centre. Most people are there. You've got Newbury Street, which is activated. there's just that sense of place with runners all over the place, and the more embroidered names and years that you've got on the back of your official Boston Marathon jacket, the more you fit in, right? So, but there was that whole vibe because everything's there, right? And you don't get that at Tokyo, right? It's not like people were running around the diver. I've forgotten what's the name of the island that it was on, but anyway, so there's no one running around there. There's no one, a diver. That's it, yeah. So, and then the same with London. There was no one doing shakeout runs, or even Berlin. Berlin's not that far out of the city. Well, when we went, anyway, they changed their expo.
5 or 6 Ks though, I think, because we walked back from the Berlin expo, and I think it was about 5-6 Ks because that was from the Flughafen.
Yeah, it was a nice walk if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I just when you get a vibe like that, I don't understand why you'd lose it, right? You've put that at risk. But anyway, I've gone on enough.
No, that's it. I'm going to leave the news there for tonight. I'm going to save the other bit of news that I've got for next week on there. It can wait another week because I know.
Can I just?
Yep.
I know it wasn't on the run sheet, but unfortunately, some sad news around someone that would mean a lot to a lot of us in the running community with Jeff Galloway, gone in for some neuro surgery. So he's in an induced coma. So, I just, the family, I just wish Jeff and the family all the best. And I know that there are so many people that owe their running careers to the run-walk method that Jeff instigated. So he's hoping that he gets back into some level of fitness and can get back into doing what he does so well, and that's inspire runners right around the world. So,
yeah, no, 100% agree, and that was sad to hear that news. So, and on that note, that's the news this week, Tara.
Excellent, thanks for that, Tim. So now it's time for my next clue for Tara's trivia. Okay, so sorry, I'm just trying to read my notes and not Tim's. This marathon has over 1 million spectators and has more than 35,000 participants. So over 1 million spectators. So that's pretty interesting.
Big time race, first held in 18th of February 2007.
Yep, and has more than 35,000 participants. So don't guess it, guys. Anyone that's listening to the podcast, yes, you can guess. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about the BPI Index. So the BPI is the back of pack friendliness. No, so Tim's got this around the wrong way. It's actually the BPF Index.
Or BPI. I've got it 3 ways listed.
Tim's really confusing me tonight. Back of the pack friendliness we're talking about. So before you talk about specific races that may be friendlier than others, I'm going to pass it over to you guys. So what makes a race friendly for back of the packers? Tony, I'm going to start with you.
I think the first thing that a back of the packer runner looks for is what is the overall cutoff time for the marathon. So that's the first thing.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
I would agree with that, and then also to have paces that match the cutoff, because sometimes what you'll find in some races, like for instance, they may say, okay, we've got a 6-hour cutoff, but yet they'll only have paces up until 5 hours. So I think having paces that match the cutoff is definitely key.
Yep. Peter, you're a back of the packer and you love being the tail walker. So you tell us about.
Absolutely. Well, just to add on to what Lich said, not only paces that have the cutoff time, but I think the sweeper roll is completely underrated as well. If the listeners don't know, I always pace the cutoffs for Gold Coast and Sydney for the past 3 years. And I think that sweeper roll is so valuable because the pacers do have to stay on time if they're doing 6 hours or 6 hours 40. So just to have that extra layer of support behind us to encourage people that just need a little bit of time spent with them can make all the difference. I really like the events that will have the sweeper role there. I think that's so important.
Absolutely. Tim, I know you and I, we both love the back of the pack. It's normally about the camaraderie of the people at the back because we're all doing it tough and we're all trying to encourage each other to get through what can be sometimes like the first time that you're doing the hard thing, or it could be like Tim and I, we've done it many, many times, and we still like that encouragement from others and just helping each other out and letting other people know you're not alone on this journey.
The other thing for me, when back of the pack friendliness is things like, do they have all the amenities there for the back of the packers? Sometimes you go to certain events and everything's tailored towards the elites or the fast runners. They get the great corral spaces and the front up space. They get special dedicated zones where they can prepare and warm up and warm down. And in some other races, they get all the attention, they get all the social media, they get all the feel, and then when you get to the event as a back of the packer, you feel very ostracized and left out and lonely. So
even packing up things like water stations and stuff like that, and not having gels and stuff like that. Tim and I, when we ran the Berlin Marathon, I think we ran that in 5 hours. So certainly not the very back of the pack, but there was no gels left by the time we got through the 32K mark, which was, you would think that there'd still be gels left and all of that. But Sydney do that very well. But anyway, I'm not saying other races aren't friendly for back of the packers, but there are some that focus more about the faster runners than others that are doing the hard slog at the back. Not saying that the ones at the front aren't doing a hard slog, because they certainly are. They're just not out there for as long. But guys, what are some of the races out there that you've been to where you've felt as an outer as a back of the packer? Tony? Sorry.
Well,
Luke? Tony?
No. Go, Tony.
Okay. So when we did Amsterdam last year in October, there was a couple of things that really brought this front of mind for me, right? So, we registered for Amsterdam without recognizing there was a 6-hour cutoff, which was the official cutoff was 6 hours. And so that really brought it front of mind because we come out of Sydney, where a 7-hour cutoff from, I think from the last, correct me if I'm wrong, Luch, from the last starter, that, and then going into a race, and we needed just about all bar 3 minutes of that 7 hour because of the shape that unfortunately my wife was in. But and then going into Amsterdam, carrying some injury and fundamentally not training with Sydney brought it really crashing home to me that I felt pretty stupid that I'd registered for an overseas event with a 6-hour cutoff without sort of recognizing that. But the amount of work that I had to put into that mentally and strategically to understood how it all worked for Amsterdam. So that was one of the first really big things that I saw. So over to you, Luch.
I'm really struggling to think of one because with the ones that I've been involved in, so for instance, Sydney caters fantastically for back of the packers. I'm trying to think of one which doesn't. If I'm going to say one, now this was my very first marathon, so yes, I was very inexperienced. I thought, how hard can it be? Turns out it's a little bit hard. So I don't know if it's changed since then. Paris. So I remember I was as we were crossing over some of the timing mats later on, so I think there was one maybe at about 35 and 40K. They were packing up those timing, half the timing mats, and a lot of the water stations had packed up. Yeah, at that point, I'm cursing myself every second, but it's you want to give those people who are still out there some sense, okay, we're not packing up yet. We're going to wait right till the end. So if any of the ones that have probably stood out, for me, it would be Paris.
Excellent. Yeah, and see, Boston for me for exactly the same reason, and everyone knows. Like Tim and I got 4 seconds. Tim would have been a lot faster, but thanks to me, he wasn't. But back of the pack for Boston, you do not want to be back of the pack for Boston. It is definitely not a race that you want to be a slow back of the packer. You will not get water at the end of it. You will not have support on course, and even half the crowds at the finish line have gone by then. So. Unlike New York, where they actually stay to celebrate the last people, not Boston. And everyone, I know I bag Boston a lot. I know people love Boston. I know I had a bad experience there, but they do not cater for back of the packers. So that's just my personal experience. And Peter saw me at the end of Boston Marathon. She was there for me, her and her good friend Roz. They were handing me water because there wasn't even water at the finish line. They had managed to score a couple of bottles and they gave me a bottle of their water. So that sort of thing is quite a little bit, it sort of gets you on the nose a little bit is the nicest way to put it. Yeah. Peter, what about you?
A similar thing to what you guys have said, I certainly have. Doesn't happen often, but I have had a situation where because I'm at the back, some of the earlier water stations have run out. They've just been wiped out by the other participants, or they've got sports drinks but no water. I've also had situations where the 30K mark, where there's supposed to be gels, there's no gels left. I know that's going to happen, so I always carry enough, but the other participants don't necessarily know that. So I'm sure some people do get caught short when they need a gel critically at that stage. The other thing that always disappoints me is when the music stopped by the time we get through, or the entertainment's packed up, or they're just sitting there not playing. I see that a lot, unfortunately. But I will say that the marathons I have been pacing at have improved a lot over the past 3 years. And I have seen that there is still music there, and they will be still playing, that none of, especially the Australian events, have run out of water. So things are improving, I would say, but yeah, I have seen some of those classic unfortunate incidents that could really ruin a person's day. The other classic is getting to the finish line, and this has happened to me at both Gold Coast and Sydney, and you know, there's literally no one in the event village. They've all gone. So while we've been on the receiving end of some very nice guards of honour, by the time we come through from the wonderful volunteers at these events, you get your medal, you go through to the, you know, the picnic area or wherever the post-event activations are held, and there's no one there. Like, we were actually quite shocked. Both Gold Coast and Sydney improved that dramatically last year, and there was heaps of people still there. There was still music going on, and there was an atmosphere, and people were just chilling on the grass, you know, having something to eat and really enjoying it. So I'd say we were actually shocked to see how many were still there.
Yep. Tim?
Yeah, the other ones are around paces. So I see it a lot in races where, say if it's a half marathon, they'll have paces at 1 hour 20, 1 hour 25, 1:30, 1:40, 1:45, 1:50, 2 hours. And then maybe one at 2 hours 15, and if you're lucky, maybe one at 2 hours 30, and that's it. There's no 2 hours 45. There's no 2 hours 20 or 2 hours 10 to help people in a half marathon. It's the same in the marathon. They're pretty good in that distance between sort of 3.5 hours and say 5 hours, 5.5 hours. But beyond that, you won't get a lot of paces and events. And I get it. They rely on volunteers to stick their hands up and be volunteers, and it's good that both you and Peter and Lucia stick their hands up and do it in Sydney. And a lot of people, they want to run it. They don't want to shuffle their way through it. I get that. But if you're going to have paces, you've got to cater for everybody who's doing the event. And I think that's another thing where a lot of organisers will come unstuck for the back of the packets that don't make it so appealing or so friendly around that. The other things, as you say, water stations. And it's not necessarily the ones at the end. Like Gold Coast this year, by the time we got to the first, second and third drink stations, Patrick and I, which were running at that stage at 5 hour pace or 4 hours 45 pace or thereabouts, there was no water. in the first sort of 10 kilometers of the race. And I know for Peter and Tara, there was no water. I know, Tony, you're struggling with water as well at that point. So, they've got to find a way that, okay, if they're going to have water, they've got to make sure there's enough there for everyone to have 2 cups of water, or at least have that sort of allowance there for everyone to have it. Because once it's gone, especially for back of the packers, you're out there for 5-6 hours. If you're dehydrated in the first 10 kilometers, it's a very long, tough stroll to get through the rest of the race. Yes, it's tough for everyone else. A 2.5-hour runner is going to struggle if they don't have water, but they're not out there for as long. And I think that's what people forget is people who are doing a 4 or 5, 6-hour marathon, 7-hour marathon. It's a hard slog for those people with their legs, their muscles, their hydration levels, more so than I think it is for a 3.5 or a 4-hour runner, which I can say because that's where I sit. So, yeah, it is a tough slog.
And you can say that, Tim, because you can run a fast marathon and you do choose to run them slow. So you've got both sides of it. So, Peter, I'm going to direct this one mostly at you. And this is probably because you are the tail end Charlie 95% of your marathons at the moment with your pacing. Not 95%, but you know what I mean. Like you have done it several times. If you were a race organizer, what are some of the things that you would do to make all runners feel important, especially those at the back of the pack? What would you change as a race director?
Yeah, and I guess we're not just talking about marathons here either.
No, it's 5K, 10K, whatever.
Yeah, and I think they have gotten good at, offering a variety of distances, including those that will suit entry level. And we see this at triathlon events as well, when they do things like tempter tries and pinky tries, just to have a go type distances, where they're very supportive environments. And, they'll actually show you how to set up in transition and how to get from the pool to the bike, which is incredibly intimidating. I remember doing my first triathlon event and not really knowing which direction to leave the bike racking area, and having a volunteer not speak very nicely to me, and, henceforth I don't do triathlons anymore. So, but things like that, even having special offers for first timers that have never done the event before, maybe it's a discount, maybe it's a special rate, having guided training programs on the website of the event where, you're doing the 5K, here's a beginner program to help you out. Just trying to help prepare people for that distance and what they're in for. I really like the events that have local training groups, like Sydney Marathon has a run club. How good's that? And it's already started for this year's event, and there's multiple opportunities. Yes, you have to live in Sydney, but, that environment, that camaraderie is created right for 6 months leading up to the event. So I also think very important to have that family-friendly atmosphere, because as we know, there's a lot of family and friends that are there on course supporting. It's really nice if there's something for the kids to do in the event precinct at the finish line, and there's some great food and drink options for the family and friends waiting. I can tell you, and you probably know as well as a spectator, they can have a harder day than we have doing the marathon. They're out there on their feet for 5, 6, 7 hours as well. They might be hustling on public transport to get around and follow us on the course. It can be really exhausting. So just having something nice for the supporting family and friends to do as well can just make their day a little bit more pleasant as well.
Excellent. And you guys got anything to add to that? Lucia, Tony, anything else that you think would work well for a back of the pack race organizer?
I really like Peter's idea of giving first timers something extra or a discount just to entice people to try it for the first time. Really love that idea, and nothing more than what we've already discussed. I think for me, the big one is having paces that match the cutoffs.
Yep.
Yeah, I think a lot of race organisers face that choice. So when I think about the BPI, the back of the pack index, and I think about some of the races that I've looked at. So a race like Valencia. So does the organizer look at that event and say, do I want credibility as a fast PB course, or do I want to move towards the inclusive side? And to me, I don't think you need to make a choice. I think you can have both. You know, by doing some of the things that Peter's said, for example, is a really good place to start. I think you can cater for both ends of a marathon field if you've got the desire and if you truly want to be inclusive. You look at a marathon like New York, right? So New York is an elite, tough marathon, right? And it's got that credibility because it's not easy to do. It's tough. There's hills, there's bridges. It's 42.2 kilometers on the best, flattest course ever is a tough thing to do. Yet they've also got this amazing thing around inclusivity and the finishing line and closing it at 10 o'clock and final finishes. So they've found a way to cater for both, right? So in my thoughts around race organisers, it doesn't have to be a choice. But what you do have to have is the desire to do both. Because if you don't have the desire and you just want to be known as the fastest marathon course in the world, and that's all you want to cater for, well, there's a place for that, right? And back of the pack runners are probably not going to run it. So, but I think there's an opportunity to do both.
Yeah, I think also there's opportunities for organisers to look at the party type atmosphere at the back. And we talk about the party at the back all the time, and it's a song on your pace and glory. But looking at how they create that party atmosphere. Now, I can tell you, when you've got motivated, happy, joyful, encouraging paces that are encouraging people and 100% supportive all the way, it makes a big difference. But also, I know Gold Coast does it. I've seen it at Sunshine Coast. I think Brisbane does it as well. They have motivators.
Jetty to jetty.
Yeah, they have motivators out on the course that run up and down segments of the course, just back and forward, encouraging people to keep moving, to keep on going, encouraging them and motivating them. And somewhere like Gold Coast, I think they've got 4 or 5 different zones where those motivators will be. They dress up in funky clothes. They're out there, they're yelling, they're screaming, they're encouraging, they're supporting. They're hyping up the crowds around those runners. The runners are trying to get through. And I think those are the little things that also encourage people to really want to, enjoy it at the back of the pack. It makes it a bit more fun, a bit more enjoyable. It makes them feel a bit more special as well. And they're the things they should be looking at, as well as entertainment precincts. And they all say they've got an entertainment precinct or a music zone here or something. But, is it really a party zone where there's a lot of crowds? Yes, some events do have really big hyped up crowd areas around them all where there's lots of crowd. They can put a band in there, people stick around, but they need to look at other areas of the course maybe for some of that stuff as well. So
yep.
I think any of that sort of stuff, it really helps encourage people at the back of the pack to have a better experience, as well as everyone else, obviously, as well.
And now I don't want to keep bashing Boston, but it's also nice to have medals at the end of your race, isn't it, Tony?
Yes, it would have been nice. But the interesting thing around Boston, so, Boston is a tough one. And I think we've all, apart from Luch, and I've, had a great experience at Boston. I'm not sure with Peter how her experience was uplifting or downgrading, but something like Boston where they're closing timing mats and they're very, very verbally like closing timing mats as you're coming through. But the reality is that you can cross the finish line, still get a medal, but then not be listed as an official finisher, right? So there's, if they haven't run out of medals, of course, thanks, Tara. But so there's all these little inconsistencies. So the reality is if you ran Boston, you still could have completed Boston, like the person that was 1 second or 5 seconds behind you two, for example, they completed Boston. They probably got a medal, but they're not listed anywhere as an official finisher. And look, I get it. There's got to be a cutoff, right? So I get it. But 5 seconds, the difference between a relatively positive finish line experience for you two, compared with someone who's come in and got a medal but can't actually prove that he's done the marathon. He may as well have bought it on eBay, right?
Yep.
So, yeah.
And the big issue there was, of course, 2024, we didn't know what the cutoff time was, because the rule back then was when the last runner had crossed the finish line. Unless you were on Facebook finding out what time Robert Wang actually crossed the start line, we had no idea of knowing. And I didn't have a bad day, Tony. I definitely didn't train enough. But I crossed the finish line just in front of Lucia. We pretty much did the last K together. And I was oblivious. I had no idea that I was 12 minutes in front of the cutoff, because we literally didn't know when it was. So I was pretty lucky.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they changed that rule. Everybody knows now. It's a set time.
5:30 p.m.
Exactly.
Yep.
And other events like Gold Coast, for example, there's a cutoff time, but they do have a grace period. So they will let you finish on the footpath if you're in front of the sweeper bar. And fun fact for everybody, I actually went into the results and counted last year after my partner and I crossed at 6 hours 39. There was actually 73 people behind us that were allowed to finish, got a time, got a medal, got a shirt. And that's how you do it, Gold Coast.
Yeah.
So,
And I know Tim
really
and I,
like that.
I know Tim and I at Gold Coast on that footpath, because they're running along beside the tents at that time. So we actually stick around at the tents and chair everybody that is the last finishers on, and chair them on ourselves. Look, we purposely stay back for that. So just to make sure that those ones that have finished after you guys, or after the paces, we make sure that they get included as well. But anyway, Tony, I want to talk about this new index that you have developed, because we're going to run out of time if we don't. So what is the back of the pack index that you've got here?
All right. So the back of the pack index was driven from me, I guess, after Amsterdam. And I just started to look at, after Amsterdam, I put out an out and back around Amsterdam and compared me with my strategy on the day to a young lady in England called Shan, and she ran the more traditional sort of back of the pack route. And in Amsterdam, there were 5 severe cutoffs that you needed to get to by 25K. But then from then on, you pretty much had open slather, because that's when the half marathon course kicked in. I won't bore the people with the details. Go have a look. So, but you know, one of the things that I really started to look at after Amsterdam is how many of the field finished after 6 hours, how many finished after 5 hours, just to get a bit of a gauge. And Amsterdam was like, I think I've got the number still here. Amsterdam post 5 hour finishes, only 7% of the field finished Amsterdam longer than 5 hours. So 7.6%. And that sort of really shocked me, to be honest. I thought it would be more. And then Valencia, it's 4.9%. So 5% of the field is finishing the Valencia marathon after 5 hours. So I started to think, because that's probably the first thing that I then started thinking about, you know, how many other marathons do you have where the onus is more or less on the back of the pack as opposed to the front of the pack? So I had a look at Honolulu, right? Honolulu post 5 hour marathon finishes, right? So Valencia, 4%. Amsterdam, 7%. Honolulu, 75% of the field finish post 5 hours, right? So if I'm a back of the pack runner, I'm thinking, hey, I might run Honolulu.
You might win your age group.
Yeah. Walt Disney, right? Let's 77% of the field at the Walt Disney Marathon finished post 5 hours. So that's what got me thinking, what else goes into this concept? It's not just about how much of the field. And the reason why I looked at that much of the field, because as you know, when I was doing Amsterdam, I'm on my Pat Malone as a back of the pack. I felt alone, back of the pack marathon runner surrounded by quickly pacing half marathon runners, right? So it was this real oxymoron. So I felt really lonely when I'm surrounded by packs of runners running through. So it didn't surprise me that there was 8% of the field less than 5 hours, greater than 5 hours. So using my research tool and my research platform, and I started looking at other things, and pretty much everything that we've spoken about today. Post 5 hour finishes. So how are the slower runners showing up? How are they being represented? Total event cutoff time. Does the race allow plenty of time to finish? Immediate cutoff flexibility. So what that means is how many cutoff points there are and how flexible are they? Are checkpoint rules flexible for safety and inclusion? Aid station support for final finishes. I think we've talked about that a fair bit. The finish line experience for last finishes. Volunteer and marshal attitude. And to be honest, most of the races we've looked at, the volunteers do a great job. But there's some where maybe the attitude of the marshals is challenging for a back of the pack runner. Course access late in the race. Can slower runners still stay on the official route? So I know, even though New York is, I celebrate New York in many ways, ultimately there comes a time where the roads do open again and runners are asked to go to the footpath. And just what we talked about with Gold Coast, that's a positive thing, but is the course still available for back of the packers? Visibility and recognition of all finishes, logistics and services availability late, so toilets, gear retrieval, transport, athlete villages. Peter, I might throw that one in. And finally, the last one is about what is their messaging to the public? Is it about inclusivity, or is it about come and run a world's best PB or something? So I do a little bit of research, and I utilize AI to do that research as well. It comes up with some scores when I've pumped everything in, and it's been very interesting. So when we've rated Valencia, and this is out of 5, by the way, the rating is out of 5. So Valencia is rated a 1. So the higher the score, the more likely, more back of the pack friendly, right? Valencia is a 1, Amsterdam's 3.2, Honolulu is a 5, right? Honolulu, back of the pack, let's get out there, let's do it, let's have some fun. Walt Disney's 4.9. One that came to my mind recently is Jakarta, and they've got a really strict cutoff of 5.5 hours, and that's mainly based on weather, but 2.1 for the back of the pack. Recently did Tokyo, I think, yeah. Let's have a look at what, and I've done a bit of a summary of the 6 majors, but I won't go into that because I haven't sort of finalized that. But Tokyo has got a rating of 2.65 out of the 5, and the classification is challenging, right? So the back of the pack index isn't there to tell you don't do it, right? What it's there to tell you is I've got to prepare for this particular event. I've got to show up. I've got to be ready to go. And, we've talked about Reese's experience at Berlin, where unfortunately he was cut off at the Brandenburg Gate. When you're aware of these things, it helps you prepare for them, and it helps you train for them. And that's exactly what I found out when I did Amsterdam. Now, when I found out it was 6 hours, the amount of research I went in there to actually understand what that looked like was incredible, but so much so that I was very comfortable standing there. But if I'd only just realized on starting day that it's a 6-hour cutoff, and if I hadn't hit the 25K by this particular time, I was going to be in some trouble. So that's what the back of the pack index is there. It gives you an understanding of, maybe some of the challenges of particular courses. And as we continue to talk about marathons, I'll be doing the BPI. So to give us all a bit of an indicator.
Yeah. And Tony, are you going to post them on our website as well?
It is already available on our website. You'll see the link in the menu called BPI Index. There is a page that explains it all with some really good pics, I must say. And then underneath that is every respective post around each particular marathon that we've done so far. So I did one in general for all the super halves, so that's available on the on that particular page. And it's the only place where you'll find those posts around the back of the pack index by following that BPI Index link at the top menu on our website. And you'll see all the ones that we've done, that I've done: Jakarta, Walt Disney, Honolulu, the Super Halves, Tokyo. And then I've done a generic post saying, can a 6-hour runner complete the marathon majors? So that gives you a little bit of insight as well. So it's all pretty cool.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Tony. So if any of our listeners have got a marathon or a race that they'd like Tony to evaluate, please feel free to send it in, because we can add that to that BPI, and we can give you Tony can give you a nice little detailed rating there as well. So it's been a really fun discussion, guys. I know we're running out of time, so I'll start wrapping it up. But I will just give you my last clue for my trivia before we go to Tony's tip for tonight. So hopefully you can guess it from here, because this is a pretty easy giveaway now. So
it is for me, because I can see the answer already.
So this race officially became a major in 2013 and has a theme of the day we unite. So I think all of us as hosts should know this, because it is an upcoming race very soon. Tony, have you got your guess?
Is it Tokyo?
And which clue gave it away first for you?
Tokyo's that interesting one, isn't it? Because it really only kicked off relatively early and picked up the major status only 5 or 6 years. And that's always, that little piece of trivia has always stood in my memory. So.
Excellent. So, Tony, we're going to go to your tip for your very first tip in the whole entire... Is this seriously the very first time you've given us a tip?
Yeah, probably.
Excellent. We get to actually hear something from Tony for a change. So, Tony, let's do it.
I'm sensing there is
Tony's tip, take it or leave it. Some days you run, some days you breathe in. I've tried it wrong, I've tried it late, still cross that line at my own pace. It's Tony's tip, no finished trick, just something I needed when I needed it.
Do it.
I'm sensing the excitement from Tony on this.
No, I am excited, but I had to prepare something, Luke. I normally just sit down and
wing it,
talk gibberish, that's my role in the podcast. No, actually, this is a serious one that relates back to our topic of the back of the pack runner. The reality is that there may be some races out there that you may feel uncomfortable at as a back of the pack runner, but the reality is that if you understand what you're signing up for, and actually do things like read the athlete's guide, go looking for people's experiences, look through YouTube and see if anyone's done races. Doing that preparation and actually training for what's in front of you, I find it hard to believe that there would be a very few amount of marathons that would ultimately prohibit you from running. Yes, there may be some you feel uncomfortable with, I get it, but the reality, understand what you're signing up for, understand things like cutoffs, get the experience from people who've done it before, whether it's in YouTube videos or influencers telling you everything that's golden about it. But understanding those concepts, train and prepare and have a bit of a strategy. I mean, I think back to Lucia at Boston, and the strategy that she had, that she just delivered that day. And you could see that as she crossed the finish line, and we have a little bit of a joke with Lucia clapping herself as she goes across, but that's what it should be with runners with any race. Understand what you're in for, prepare for it, and have a strategy on the day and execute it to the best of your ability. And we shouldn't then be scared of any marathon, because I know that we can do it. Probably the only one that I'm not signing up for is Jakarta, and that's probably more about the heat than anything else. So that's Tony's tip.
Excellent. Thanks, Tony. That's awesome tips. So very, very helpful. So Tony, before this episode, thanks, Tony. This episode is about to end. But before we do that, Peter, what's on for next week?
Thank you, Tara. Well, following on from talking about back of the pack friendliness, next week we're going to be talking about our non-negotiables when selecting races and travel destinations around the world. Whilst we all have hundreds of races on our bucket list, in reality, we do have to put some races and destinations above others. So on next week's show, we'll share with you why we choose to run the races that we run, what makes them special and attractive to run, and how we're able to get entry into these races when it can be challenging at times. So as we keep saying, we're the only podcast with 5 7-star world major marathoners, and as usual, it will be another great episode and definitely not one to be missed.
Excellent. Thanks, Peter. So that's it for this week's show. And as usual, it's been another fun one. Hopefully we've once again inspired some of our listeners to choose races which provide an awesome race day experience. Whether you're a fast runner, slow runner, or a middle of the pack runner, it doesn't matter. Just pick a race that suits you. Go on with Tony's BPI, and the world is your oyster to pick the race that needs to be picked. So we love making this podcast for you, our listeners. So why not contact us with a message on Instagram, Facebook, or email us at happyrunning@flyingrunner.com. Tell us your thoughts. Did we get the BPI right for the races we've talked about? Would you like to add to the list of events by compiling your own rating that we can add to the list? We love getting feedback, and we'll reply to most messages in a very timely manner. You can watch this episode on Spotify and YouTube, or listen on Apple, Amazon, and all other major platforms. Every step counts. Keep running, and we'll see you next time on the Flying Runner podcast. Happy running.
Happy running.
Happy running.
Happy running.
Teach the flying runner, run far, run free. Host the 7 stars, inclusive as can be.